The Philippines Presidential Palace, home to a museum dedicated to the country's leaders. They include Joseph Estrada, sentenced to life in prison last year for taking massive kickbacks, then pardoned by his successor, the current president. There's also space set aside for the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos, a tiny part of his wife Imelda's infamous shoe collection, and a maudlin portrait of the former First Lady. It's the Philippine people who should be shedding the tears for the Marcos legacy and successive leaders' failure to overcome it after more than 2 decades of democracy. The anti-corruption watchdog group Transparency International estimates that Marcos illegally siphoned off up to $10 billion, equivalent to 4.5% of the Philippines' GDP. But his unfortunate legacy goes far beyond robbing the country. There's the cost of the protectionist walls erected to shield his cronies from foreign competition, many still in place, and the massive debts that have left the country's infrastructure in a dire state, and in turn deterred foreign investment and restricted growth.
The Marcos years were a waste in that development. It was backwards. We went backwards during that time, and that was about 2 decades worth. Institutions were destroyed, development stopped. Having gone through that, it is very difficult to restore institutions.
Marcos left the country with a system in which political parties are virtually non-existent, where politics is based on personalities, not platforms or ideology.
There's a real lack of responsibility and transparency. The politicians were captured by vested interests as individuals. So running for public office is very expensive, and therefore you have to make deals along the way.
The emphasis on personalities and the fact that presidents can only serve one 6-year term has also led to questionable leadership and a lack of continuity.
Under successive administrations following the Marcos era, good economic policies were only followed for short periods. So you have a sequence of boom-bust cycles. The bad economic policies in this country have resulted in a situation in which the Philippines has grown at a rate which is 4 or 5 percentage points beneath the rate of its neighboring countries over a 40-year period.
Last year, the Philippines did register its best growth in more than 30 years. Though a little over 7%, it was pretty average by regional standards.
What's that? That's nothing. That's 1 year. It has to carry on for a sustained period of time. 10 years is more like a sustainable time period.
That lack of sustained growth has left some 40% of Filipinos still living in poverty, like this bicycle rickshaw man in Manila, who only earns about $2.50 a day.
Our life was easier when Joseph Estrada was still the president. I was able to send 4 kids to high school all at the same time. But now I'm only sending 1 child, and I really find it difficult.
Observers say the government of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo is making some progress, having improved fiscal stability and increased the revenue it collects via corruption-prone departments such as taxation and customs. That in turn has helped reduce, if not eliminate, the crippling deficit. Corruption continues to add an estimated 1/5 to the cost of doing business in the Philippines, though, bleeding funds from the government. It's a vicious circle that has trapped even the lead agency in the fight against corruption.
It's just a thin slice of the budget pie that we're getting. We are trying our best to be able to hire more prosecutors, more investigators, and more staff. And we don't even have a building, a space to house the personnel that we would be recruiting, and we need to recruit to help us in our work.
Arroyo, who herself has been dogged by allegations of corrupt practices, will have to hand over to a new president in 2010. And that leaves her just 2 years to try to make sure that when she takes her place in the Presidential Palace Museum, she might be remembered for mostly the right reasons.